Speaking of re-evaluation,
yes,
let's talk about the abdication crisis.
Yes,
okay.
I think we need to re-evaluate the role of Wallace.
Okay, so Edward and Mrs. Simpson, you may well have watched that on television many years ago. Then we touched down again with the King's Speech, because there was a little bit of that.
There's quite a lot of that in there.
Yes, absolutely. We're talking about Madonna's new film, W.E. It stars Andrea Riseborough. We'll speak to her in just a moment.
W.E. is the new Madonna film. It stars Andrea Riseborough as Wallace Simpson, and Andrea is here. Andrea, thanks for joining us. Tell us how you played Wallace Simpson.
Well, I think really the first thing to mention is the script, in that it was unique. And it was the first thing that I was sent, and it was the first thing I responded to, because it was exploring the life of Wallace Simpson, who, as you know, is a very notorious character, but through the eyes of a more modern-day story, which involves Wally Winthrop. And she vicariously lives through the romance that the Duchess of Windsor experienced with the King, really to escape her own dissatisfaction in her marriage. And then the two storylines intertwine, and Wally and Wallace have a relationship with one another in which Wallace proffers advice to Wally and eventually enables her to be freed from her dissatisfaction and unhappiness. So I thought not only was she an enigmatic and fascinating character to explore, but that it was a unique and innovative way in which to explore her.
Is the modern day story there to illustrate the older story? Is that its purpose?
I really, that's a question for Madonna, and because I think in its inception she had a very clear idea of exactly why the structure existed as it did. My job as an actor there is to be a cog, as it were, within that whole process. She holds the reins where all things objective and narrative are concerned.
But did it strike you? I mean, clearly, when you read the script and you reacted to it, you liked the idea that Wallace Simpson, in some way, is talking to this character set in the present.
I thought that was very unique, very brave. I thought it was a very brave structural decision, and something that would be worth exploring. Madonna had seen me play Margaret Thatcher in The Long Walk to Finchley, and she'd also seen a couple of other films that I'd made.
So, but she thinks the truth hasn't been told then, yet, until now. So this is a sort of a revisionist history.
Well, nobody's really made a job of telling the truth until now. I think it's very hard for a country to swallow the idea that we've been fed a lie. And Stanley Baldwin had a fantastically successful propaganda campaign in place whereby there was an embargo on press of Wallace and Edward, so that the working man in Great Britain had no idea that Wallace existed until 2 weeks before the abdication. Maybe rumours, but no relationship with her, really. 2 weeks before the abdication, when Stanley Baldwin realises that it's not going to go any other way than Edward is going to abdicate because he's totally in love with this woman and cannot have both kingdom and woman, he decides to drop the embargo, and the pictures of the couple are bandied through the press. Had Britain's everyman had an idea of their relationship beforehand, they were very fond of Edward. They may have even understood his love for her. They may have admired that he had love for a woman who, by all accounts, was pretty plain, the way she looked. And initially, when they first started having any sort of relationship, which at this stage was not sexual in any way, she was very she looked very plain. She did not possess finery. 2 weeks before the abdication, of course, she was clad head to toe in couture and dripping with a lot of England's jewels that he'd gifted to her years before. And it was an awful shock for the British public to suddenly have this image of androgyny and couture, which was very alienating. The reason Stanley Baldwin needed them out of the way at that time was because he saw that Bertie had to step in. Bertie was far less politically active, and Bertie was not groomed to be king.
But the conventional wisdom is, and maybe as portrayed in the King's Speech, is that we got the right king in the end. That what we got was a committed king devoted to his country and to his family and to a sense of duty. And the king that we missed out on, thank heavens, is the one who was the Nazi sympathiser who had no sense of duty.
And that's the thing that's hard to
is that not
be
true?
Faced with. that they weren't Nazi sympathisers, that the idea that they weren't Nazi sympathisers, that she hadn't learnt strange sex acts in Shanghai, that she wasn't a man. Oh yes, there's lots more. That she wasn't a man, that she wasn't an hermaphrodite. That she wasn't a temptress and manipulator, a witch almost. Once they've been fed to you, and they had in this extraordinary propaganda campaign, then it's very hard to sort of backtrack. There are a lot of
all
people
the
who
evidence
convened with Hitler.
So all the evidence that the Duke of Windsor had said positive comments about Hitler, that's made up? Or?
No, that's not made up at all. It's at a time when, unfortunately, a lot of people made positive comments about Hitler's so-called social reform. Of course, there was less unemployment. He was destroying half of his own population.
Do you think, and this is hinted at towards the end of the film, do you think they had any idea of the life that they were signing up to?
Yes, good question. I think that Edward was utterly besotted with her, and she him. But so much so, and having less experience, because this was her third marriage to be, that he was blinkered to the fact that they might never again achieve the kind of purpose that he had had when he was king. And he wrote and pleaded and called and begged to try and be made use of by the British monarchy. But they would rather he were out of the picture, and I understand that. I truly understand that.
I guess he chose an exile. One question I have to ask you. There's a scene where you dance.
Yes.
Like a Charleston kind of dance.
Yes.
You dance at the end of the movie, but also you dance earlier.
Yes.
And the music that we hear, although you're dancing at Charleston, the music that we hear is the Sex Pistols.
Yes.
Pretty Vacant. Did you know that it was Pretty Vacant that we were going to be hearing when you did that dance?
Yes, we rehearsed the dance, which was choreographed for the most part, but then leads into, as you know, because you've seen the film,
it's quite a surprise.
Benzodrine cocktail fueled hedonistic mess, which is just incredible fun. So the choreographed dance we rehearsed to two different tracks. One was a very conventional track of the period, and another one was the Sex Pistols. And when we filmed it in the end, because of timing, we danced to the conventional track, and then later the Sex Pistols were added in. But we had rehearsed the Sex Pistols previously, so we did know.
It's a memorable moment.